If you are looking for a new pair of football boots, then this video should be helpful for you. Because today we're going to be talking about over a dozen of the best football boots of the year at 3 different price points. And the good thing is pretty much all of the boots we're going to be going over can be found for less than $200, and some of them can even be found for under $100. I have also done full reviews for all of the boots we're going to discuss, so if you want to go a little bit more in depth, you can search for those reviews on my channel. And if you are interested in picking up any of the boots that we go over, you can find links to them with exclusive discount codes in the description below. So let's kick things off with the first category, and that's for the best football boots at $100 or less. So the first boot we have here in the $100 category was a pretty easy decision, and it is the F50 League from Adidas. And when we talk about the F50 League, we're talking about both the messy version that I have here, as well as the standard variation, which looks a little bit different and comes in different colorways. Now, the F50 League is the third tier takedown of the F50 series, and it currently retails for a full price of $90, but with some discounts and sales going on, you might be able to find it for less. And simply put, this is just probably the best third tier takedown football boot you can get on the market. Usually when you get one of these more affordable versions of expensive boots like the F50, you can make a lot of concessions and you end up making compromises. Sometimes they can feel bulky, the fit might not be as good, but you just don't have any of those same shortcomings with the F50 League. The upper is still really thin, it gives you a ton of sensitivity. It has a pretty innovative tongue here, especially this messy version I have here. It basically attaches to the bottom of both sides of the insole here, almost forming like a tunnel fit tongue. I believe Adidas calls it a suspended tongue. Actually, I'll correct that, they call it a floating tongue. Either way, both the comfort and lockdown that you get from these boots is absolutely top tier. They feel really soft around the heel area and really comfortable throughout the entire length of the boot. They're relatively average when it comes to the width, so I'd say if you're a really wide-footed player, there might be some better options, but this is going to be accommodating for the majority of players. And if you are wondering about the slight differences between the messy version and the League version, they are almost identical in terms of the design and the fit, but the upper between the two boots is going to be a little bit different. With the messy version I have here, it's going to have a hybrid touch upper. It's a little bit softer and has more of a synthetic leather type feel to it, whereas with the standard version of the F50 League, you're going to have a slightly more ridged, textured synthetic that is going to give you maybe a little bit more grip on the ball. Then next up, we're talking another affordable Adidas model with the Copa Gloro 2. And the Gloro 2 is going to come just under our price point at $99. Now, the Copa Gloro is going to be a full calf leather upper, and I believe it's one of the cheapest leather boots that you can get that's still going to be really high quality. Now, obviously, it's not going to be quite as thin or quite as light as some of the more expensive leather football boots that are going to be on this list, but for $99, they're really reasonably priced, they're well built, and they're going to last you well over a season. And I will say, if you are a wide-footed player, you might get a slightly better fit out of the Copa Gloro 2s compared to something like the F50 League. And that's just because the Copa Gloros are going to have leather across the toe box, which does generally stretch to form to the shape of your feet over time. And although Adidas has their really popular Predator line right now, I actually think that the Copa Gloro gives you that same retro Predator feel. I also especially like that fold-over tongue with the elasticated band. But if you're not quite as much into the 3 stripes of Adidas and you prefer Nike, I would recommend highly the Premier 3. Now, similar to the Copa Gloro, the Nike Premier 3 is going to be Nike's budget leather football boot offering, and it does come in at a full retail price of $120, but I'm including it in this category because you can so often find certain models on sale for around $100 or less, depending on the colorway that you choose. And despite the fact that the Premiers are one of Nike's more affordable boots, I still actually think that they're one of their best. I actually currently have my Nike Premiers loaned to a friend right now. I mean, I say loaned, he's probably just going to keep them. But yeah, his boots got completely destroyed when he was playing. He had like his sole peeling apart from the top of his boots. They were like 3 years old. So I gave him my pair and he's actually really been enjoying them. They did transition recently from being full kangaroo leather to full calf leather, but I've tried both different versions and haven't really noticed that much of a change. They're really comfortable, really soft, and while they're not the widest fitting boot that you can get, because I mean, in general, Nikes tend to run pretty slim, I would say compared to the rest of Nike's lineup, you are going to get a little bit more stretch across the toe box and midfoot. And this is obviously going to be more of a personal thing, but I find the Premier 3s to just be so aesthetically pleasing, definitely one of the better looking boots on the market. In my experience, from a build quality perspective, they're not going to be quite as long lasting as some of the more expensive leather boots on this list, but that makes sense at their price point. And honestly, if you're just looking to get a really good season or two out of them, if you're playing around 2 to 3 times per week, they should last you for at least 6 months. But as with every boot on this list, durability is just going to be subjective, because if you're playing 4 or 5 plus times per week, it's going to be really hard to find a pair, even when you're looking at expensive boots that last more than a season or two. But if you're only playing once or twice a week at most, then almost any of the boots that we discuss should easily last you more than a year. And then my final shout out for boots under that $100 price point, if you want something a little bit more affordable, this one is also from Nike. It's going to be the Tiempo Legend 10 Academy. Unlike previous Tiempos, this one actually isn't going to be leather. It is a softer synthetic called Fly Touch. It is a little bit bulkier than the more expensive Tiempos, but the lockdown and fit is generally really good. It still gives you a pretty clean touch on the ball. I would say it's not quite as premium feeling as the F50 League, but you can pick up the Legend 10 Academies for around 60 to 70 bucks right now, and I think that's one of the best deals at that price. All right, time for the next category. Let's talk boots under $150. And in this category, we're going to start with our first New Balance boot of the day, and that is the 442 V2 Pro. Now, these are going to be a little bit more expensive than the first few leather boots we talked about. They're going to come in at a full retail price of $135. But depending on where you look, I constantly find the 442s selling for around $100 or so. Now, I also want to say there is a synthetic version of the 442 that New Balance released pretty recently, and I have not had the chance to try those on yet, so I can't really recommend them. So if you see the boots marked as synthetic or non-KL, I wouldn't necessarily recommend picking those up yet, just because I'm not really sure if the synthetic material is quality. But if you see any of these colorways, like the white with neon accents that I have here, they're going to have kangaroo leather in the toe box. There are several other colorways that also have that leather toe box, and in my opinion, this is definitely one of the best leather boots under 150 bucks. Despite looking pretty traditional on the face of it, the 442 comes in weighing about 200 grams, which means it's only about 10 grams heavier than the F50 Elite in the same size, and that's the lightest boot you can get on the market. Now, I did hear some people say when I did a full review of the 442s pretty recently that they had some issues with sole separation, but right here, these are the 442s in the wide variation. I've been playing in these for a while. I actually used these as my go-to pair of boots about 1.5 to 2 years ago, and so I wore them really heavily for about 6 to 7 months, and you can see there's a decent amount of discoloration to where the sole plate meets the upper, but there's pretty much no separation whatsoever. So I'm not saying that sole separation can't happen to you. I know it has happened to a few players, but for me, it just hasn't been a problem yet. And in terms of players that are looking for a boot with a wide fit, the 442 is going to be the best boot for that we've covered thus far. Even the standard variation that I have here has a really accommodating fit compared to other brands like Nike and Adidas and Puma. And if you really have a wider foot, or honestly just a natural shaped foot, I know that a lot of football boots tend to just be a little bit too narrow in the first place, but the good thing is New Balance sells specific wide variations like the one I have here. These ones are just going to give you a little bit more space across the front of the toe box, and in turn that gives you a little bit more volume throughout the front of the boots. And so in terms of mass-produced football boots, the 442s in the wide variation are easily the widest boots that I've ever tried on. So if that's an important consideration for you, I would probably point you towards these. And then next up, we have another Tiempo. This one is the Legend 10 Pro Emerald Edition. Now, while I said that the Premier 3 looked really good, I think that the Legend 10 Emerald might take the cake for probably the best looking boot of 2024. And we are specifically talking about the Pro version here that retails for $130. And honestly, I would recommend that you don't really spend that much more than that, because the Elites are going to retail for $220, and I've seen both boots and I really just don't see that many different features with the Elite version. I think you're pretty much getting everything that you would want and that you would need from the pros. The crosshatch diamond pattern on the upper really is something that is beautiful to behold, and the fly touch that's used on this pro version here, it's going to be a little bit softer and more premium than the Academy version that we just talked about. And while it is synthetic, it actually does a surprisingly good job replicating that feel of leather. It even has the same micrograin texture when you look at it up close. And then maybe my favorite selling point of the Legend 10 Pros is the sock-like elasticated knit inner liner that you have running through the center of the boots. They just give you a really comfortable feel and really even lockdown when you get the boots on your feet. The fit on these is going to be identical to the other standard variations of the Legend 10 Pro, but in my opinion, I think it can be worth the spring a little bit extra for looks, and I think that you can get the Legend 10 Pro for around 120 to 130, and with discounts you can get it even lower. And then next up, we're talking another second tier Pro version with the Adidas F50 Messy Pro. Now the Messy Pro does come in at a full retail price of $160, but since it's been out for a few months now, you can actually find it on sale for around $150 or less. Now with the slightly more expensive price tag, you are going to get a few features that just don't come on the League. First off, with the Pro version, you are going to have a thinner heel area that just feels a little bit less chunky on feet. And then while I would say the improvements to the upper are somewhat marginal between the League and the Pros are going to be just a little bit thinner, a little bit softer, and they're going to offer you a bit more sensitivity in terms of your touch on the ball. Overall, I've just been a huge fan of pretty much every single different F50 model at every different price point that I've tried on this year. So whether you go for the third tier, the second tier, or even the premium elite version, I don't think that you can go wrong, and the F50 Messy Pro is just no exception. And then finally, the last boot in this category, we have yet another second tier takedown Pro version, and it is the Nike Vapor 16 Pro. And this one I've got here specifically happens to be in the artificial grass variation. Now this boot kind of is a rare exception because I actually prefer this model more than the $260 elite version from Nike. And that's because the upper that you're going to find on the Pros is going to be very different from what you would find on the elites. So the $260 boots are going to have what Nike calls their grip knit coating. It feels extremely sticky to the touch, and in my opinion, it actually gives you a little bit more grip, but also a little bit less sensitivity on your touches. I actually prefer what they come through with here on the Pro version, which is just going to be a lot more similar to the previous version of the elite model, which I believe came out 2 years ago. When I'm wearing Mercurials, I just don't really want them to be that grippy on feet. I think that's more something that Nike should reserve for their Phantom GX2 line, and the Vapors here have such a matte finish to them in this Pro version, so the touch on the ball is really clean, and you don't have to worry about the ball getting stuck under your feet when you're dribbling, which sometimes can happen when you have boots that have that really sticky upper. And don't get me wrong, sometimes having that sticky upper that you get with the Phantoms, which are solid football boots, it can help you a little bit on curved shots, long balls, or if you're a free kick taker. But when I want a Vapor 16, I really want just an upper that's exactly like what you get on the Pros. Now, I will say it was a little bit tough deciding whether or not to include these because I do personally think that Nike should make the toe box just a little bit wider when it comes to the front of these boots, maybe add about a ½ centimeter or so to the very front here, just so that they're a little bit more accommodating for not just me, but other players that happen to have a little bit wider of a fit. But I do think that they're just so fun to play in. I mean, when I was wearing these, eventually my feet did adjust a little bit to the more snug sensation that these boots offer, and they just feel so precise. It's almost like you've got two knives on your feet, the way that they cut when you're dribbling and the way that you get such clean contact on your shots. They were really fun to play in. I felt a little bit of relief when I got them off after about an hour or hour and a half, just because they can be really snug at times. But I will say you get a decent amount of stretch through the midfoot with that elasticated material. And if you're a fan of Nikes and you know that they fit you, the Vapor 16 Pros are a great deal. Right now you can find them around $140 to $150, down from $160. And with that, we're going to move into our final category. We are talking boots $200 or less. So I literally just realized while putting together this list that all of my favorite boots around that $200 price point are from Japanese companies. And to kick things off, we have two fan favorites, the Mizuno Melia Neo 4 Beta Elite, as well as the Mizuno Melia 2. And I should note that the made in Japan version of these two football boots is going to come in around $280 to $290, which is very expensive for a lot of people. But if you're able to find these elite versions online, you can actually pick them up for closer to $170. Now, starting with the Neo 4 Beta Elite. Now, Mizuno does have another speed boot offering called the Mizuno Alpha, I tried on those boots. I thought that they were okay, but I'm really used to Mizuno offering something a little bit more unique that isn't offered by the other brands. And when I tried on the Mizuno Alpha, I kind of just thought that I wasn't getting much of a different experience than I would get from something like an F50 from Adidas or even a Vapor 16 from Nike. In my opinion, the best speed boot that Mizuno offers is going to be the Melia Neo 4 Beta. And in terms of overall construction and build quality, these are one of the most meticulously put together pairs of football boots that I've ever owned. You're going to have really soft leather in the toe box that's also beautifully stitched together. Then when you transition to the midfoot, you're going to have this razor thin synthetic material that offers a clean touch on the ball. That's where the logo is printed here. And then running through the center of the boots, you have this really soft, premium feeling, elasticated nib material. Then you're also going to have a lightweight and aggressive outsole with some really nice cushion padding towards the back of the heel. And if you are really accustomed to speed boots from the bigger brands, so like the Vapors from Nike or the F50 from Adidas, and you're looking to try something just a little bit different, and you maybe want to check out Mizuno for the first time, this is probably the boot that I would push you towards just because it's kind of the most similar in terms of its feature set to those other high-end models. But if you're looking for a boot with a little bit more of a traditional look and a traditional fit to it, I would actually recommend the Mizuno Melia 2 Elite. Now, unlike the Melia Neo 4 Beta, which has a blend of both leather and synthetic materials, the Mizuno Melia 2 here is pretty much full leather from top to bottom. I think pretty much the only exception is going to be the synthetic that's applied for the Mizuno logo. Now, I personally prefer these because I really love leather football boots, and the plush padded touch you get on the ball with these is just so premium. If you have ever tried on a pair of the Nike Premier 3s that retail for around $100, I would say the Mizuno Melia 2 feels, looks, and is built like a more premium version of the Nike Premier 3. The leather is going to be softer, the stitching is going to be a little bit more detailed and meticulous, and you're also going to get a higher quality sole plate. And I actually like that with the Mizuno Melia 2, you get a little bit more flexion from the sole plate compared to the Neo 4 Beta, which may just sometimes be a bit too rigid for my taste. But both of these options from Mizuno are absolutely amazing, and I find it impressive that you can get either of them for under $200 because they feel like they should be more expensive. And next up, we have a great football boot that I had never tried on before this year, and that's the Asics DS Lite X-Fly 5. Now, these are the first pair of Asics football boots that I've ever tried on, and they are going to retail for around $180 depending on the colorway. So I just got these boots in a few weeks ago and have been really impressed in my initial sessions with them, and I'm excited to break them in further. But at first glance and wearing them for the first few times, I would say they show a lot of similarities with the Mizuno Melia Neo 4. They are going to have that soft leather in the toe box, and they also do transition to a thin synthetic material on the sides of the boot. One area where I think these excel is going to be the sole plate. When you look from afar, it may just seem like these are simple conical studs, but when you look a little bit closer, you see that they have these small indentations to them, which just gives them a little bit more bite and a little bit more traction with the surface without making them too overly aggressive. And then I also really like that Asics have added these two metal rivets here, one to the front here and one to the side of the sole plate. This basically just helps assist the glue with more adhesion from the sole plate to the upper, and basically it prevents sole separation over time. I don't know why more football boots don't do this because it can be really helpful. And on top of that, these are the standard variation of the X-Fly 5, but I have also heard that Asics sells this boot in a wide variation, similar to what New Balance does with their models. So if you are a wide-footed player, I would definitely recommend checking out those wide Asics models. And then next up, guys, we have my favorite leather football boot of the year. It is the Adler Henzo. Now, these boots are also going to be coming out of Japan, but they are an even smaller company than the likes of Mizuno and Asics, so they don't really have a whole sportswear brand like those other companies. Pretty much all Adler does is sell football boots, and they only really have 4 key models. And the model that I decided to buy and review was the Henzo, because based on what I saw from their website, it looked like the thinnest and lightest offering that they had. It was pretty much their equivalent of a speed boot. And ever since these came in about 8 or 9 months ago, they have been my go-to pair of boots. They also happen to be just one of the most unique pairs of leather football boots I've ever tried on. When you compare them to the other ones we talked about here, like the Asics, the Mizuno, or even the New Balance boots, typically when you try on leather boots, they tend to be really plush and padded, And that's great for a lot of people. I love boots that have that plush padded fit that gives you that nice soft touch on the ball. But the Henzos kind of approach it from a different angle. The leather on these boots is just extremely thin and pliable. So it's not very plush, it's not very padded, it's not thick whatsoever. I mean, this upper from heel to toes is probably about 1 millimeter or less. And at first, when I did get them out of the box, I was kind of shocked at how thin the leather was, and it did make me wonder, like, are they actually going to be durable? Because there is also a lot of stitching throughout this football boot. If you look across the toe box and the size of the boot, there's a lot of different areas where the upper could fail if you got stepped on while playing. But to my surprise, after many games and many training sessions, these boots are a lot less white than they used to be. They're a little bit grayed out now. But as far as durability, as far as fit and comfort, they have pretty much stayed the same as the day that I bought them. And also, one of the simplest but coolest sole plates on this list today, look at this stitching that they have all around the perimeter of these boots that help adhere the sole plate to the rest of the upper. I'm not sure if this is hand stitch or machine stitch, but it clearly shows just a little bit more effort being put towards the build quality. And as I mentioned with the Asics, this is a feature that prevents sole separation, which is one of the most common ways that your football boots will end up in the trash. And for those wondering, I will be reviewing some more Adler boots within the next couple months as I get my hands on them. These were just the first ones I was able to review, and I was really impressed. And I covered this in my full review of these, but the sizing is a bit weird. They run very long, so I would recommend anyone order a full size down. So I'm normally a 10.5, and I got these in a US 9.5, and I definitely wouldn't want to change that. And of course, the price, which I don't think I've mentioned yet. So the Adler Henzos are going to retail for about $150, but unless you live in Japan, which I'm assuming most of you don't, although maybe a couple of you do, you're gonna have to pay $20 for shipping. So I would pretty much just price these at a flat $170. Currently, the only colors you can get, I believe, are white, red, and black. I have heard that they're trying to get some new colors down the pipeline in the coming year, so hopefully we'll see those drop in 2025. And finally, with the last boot on our list, it's another one from New Balance, but this time it's the Tequila V4 Pro. And when we're talking about the Tequila V4, there is a plus version that came out this year, and there's also the standard V4 Pro that came out a couple years ago. Both of them are very similar in terms of their design and feature set, and I would equally recommend both of them. Now, the Tequila V4 Pro is a top-end football boot, but unlike those from Nike, Adidas, and some of them from Puma that retail for more than $250, the Tequilas are going to come in at just $220. And I'm not done yet, because typically they go on sale throughout most parts of the year, and depending on the colorway, you can find some of them around $180 to $190. And considering the fact they have the build quality and the materials of a top-end football boot, the fact you can get them for under $200 is a great deal. Now, I knew that I was going to include either the Furon V7 or the Tequila V4 Low on this list. I had some trouble deciding which one to include, but ultimately, I think the fit and feel, as well as the unique sole plate of the Tequilas, is what sold me on including them. I mentioned in a previous video that the way that Tequilas are marketed, you would think they're kind of in the same category as the Phantom GX from Nike and the Predator Elite from Adidas, but in my opinion, in terms of both design, fit, and feature set, I actually think the New Balances are just the better football boot. They're gonna have a soft elasticated knit material running through the center of the boots. They're gonna have a matte finish to the upper with some raised textured elements to give you a little bit more grip on the ball. But then more importantly, they're just gonna have a slightly more anatomical, better fitting toe box for most players. And as is the case with all other New Balance boots, you can also find the Tequilas in a wide variation. But for most players, including myself, the standard version was actually wide enough. And the sole plate on the Tequilas is also really cool, and I think it's quite rare that there's actually innovation in terms of different stud design and different stud placement. I think the Asics studs that we talked about is one good example of that, but a lot of companies, when they change their stud pattern, it might just feel a little bit gimmicky. I'm especially talking about Nike here with their like Cyclone 360 pattern on the Phantoms. That's kind of stupid in my opinion, but with the tequilas, you actually get conical studs running through the center of the boots that are going to be in contact with the ground most of the time, but you have some added bladed studs around the perimeter. And those boots are going to help you dig into the pitch when you're changing directions and being a little bit more agile. I did notice a little bit of break-in time I needed with the heel area on these ones, but once I got past that, they're definitely one of the most comfortable football boots that you can get on the market. And guys, that is going to do it for this video. If you have enjoyed the video, if you found anything helpful, please leave a like. It really helps spread the channel to new people. And if you want to keep up to date with new football boot content going into next year, please subscribe to the channel. We're just hitting about 20,000 subscribers as of making this video, but my goal is to get up to 50,000 subscribers as we enter the new year. And if you can help contribute to that, I would really appreciate you. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and I will see you in the next video.